Handheld gaming is changing forever right now, and I don't just mean the generational leap forward the Switch 2 is bringing to the world's most popular dedicated handheld gaming platform. No, I mean specifically PC gaming handhelds are revolutionizing right now. Massive change. Because we have finally taken that one large step forward that I have been waiting on for, well, frankly, years now. Because just as the weekend dawned, Valve finally started delivering on their long-made promise to open up SteamOS, the operating system that is the beating heart of the Steam Deck, to other devices from third-party brands. And not only can I now install SteamOS in an officially supported manner where I can now trust automatic updates and the like, but as it turns out, it kicks the ever-living hell out of Windows 11 when it comes to game performance in otherwise exactly matched settings. So that's neat, and I've chosen a fistful of games I'll be showing you throughout this video with side-by-sides, Windows versus SteamOS, on the ROG Ally in exactly the same settings, including some games that are not Steam native and need their own launchers or belong to other storefronts, and one big problem we're still yet to fix. But spoiler alert, they all work better with SteamOS. There's no surprises here. There's not just one game that's like, oh, that one's better on Windows. No, all of them are better on SteamOS. Well, there is one that highlights a particular problem with SteamOS, but we're going to get to that. And yes, before I get actually, I know SteamOS is not the only option for running Linux in a gaming format on the handheld devices, but the reason SteamOS is so exciting is because the layman, the average person, the person who doesn't want to fiddle with bizarre little distributions of Linux that, you know, the average gamer has never heard of and all that sort of stuff, they can just go, oh, Valve do this, the Steam people, the guy who do the Steam Deck, I know them, I trust them, they're a huge global company, they're going to be around for years and years and years, they've been around for decades already. I can trust this with my device, not some sort of fly-by-night Linux distribution that was recommended on a forum somewhere by some guy. That is the big difference with SteamOS versus the other Linux gaming alternatives, and it's a big friggin' deal. Anyway, hello again, I am Blunty, and all of this came in a very significant update to SteamOS codenamed Go Country. And it dropped just before the weekend. It updates the graphics driver base, adds frame limiting support for VRR displays, both internal and external, adds a battery charge limit control at last, and a bunch more under the hood stuff that I'll leave digging through to, you know, some other channels that are, you know, deeply nerding out about SteamOS stuff updates as their whole shtick. But importantly for us in this video, it adds full official support for the Lenovo Legion Go S, the first third-party gaming device with pre-installed off-the-shelf SteamOS that you can buy, and in my opinion, more importantly, it is the first main channel stable version of SteamOS's distribution that includes official support for other AMD-powered handheld gaming devices, like my own ROG Ally. This includes the base model, the Z1 Extreme, which is the one I have, and the ROG Ally X, which is basically just the Z1 Extreme, but with a bigger battery, bigger pre-installed SSD, and slightly faster memory. Aside from that, it's identical hardware to the one I've got. Plus the original Legion Go, that works too, and a pile of other lesser-known brands that use this same AMD hardware base for their handhelds. And I wish I had recorded the install process for this because it was the smoothest OS install I have ever done. And I mean, out of any Linux install or Windows install, anything, it was super smooth, super fast, super easy. I was bewildered how smoothly it went. So I've done a lot of OS installs over the years, and there's always just that one little crappy issue that you stub your toe on, right? Not with this. It just went. Now, there is one little gotcha right now, as this is kind of the first step, the initial official support for devices like the ROG Ally, and while everything worked perfectly right out of the gate, the built-in controller, of course, including the gyro and programmable back buttons, they work flawlessly. The touchscreen, of course, works perfectly. The Wi-Fi, the Bluetooth, the sound, the video, all of that stuff, zero issues. Keyboard and mouse support, external controllers, both wired and wireless, everything just works. And I mean, just works. Not in the Todd Howard way of just working, where it just works, but in the actual way, it just works. But the one thing that might make you want to wait for it to be fixed is the fact that right now, you do not have access to the power profiles. So while under Windows, you can use the 9-watt low power mode, the 15-watt default performance mode, and even a 30-watt turbo mode on your ROG Ally, or even set a completely custom power profile like the 18-watt mode a lot of ROG enthusiasts swear by as the perfect balance. As it stands right now, SteamOS on the Ally and similar devices is nailed down to the default 15-watt power mode only. And there is one game in my testing set that this is a big issue for. This is the problem child that I mentioned, but we will get to that. There's other games I would normally run in turbo mode for smoother performance or just better settings, like Cyberpunk, which I usually run in the 18-watt custom mode or the 30-watt turbo mode to squeeze out more consistent performance and target 45 FPS, or maybe just turn up a couple of extra graphic settings. However, because of the lack of Windows 11's notorious bloat and thirst for system memory and gluttonous consumption of other system resources in the background while you're trying a bloody game, running it under SteamOS actually sees the 15-watt power mode reach the performance level I would normally only scrape against with the 18-watt power mode, even perhaps slightly better. And I gotta tell you, I was not expecting that. Sure, we know, Windows is a pig. It swallows up resources all the time that you could be using for gaming, and there's nothing you can bloody do about it. But I had anticipated that to be offset by the fact that SteamOS runs Windows native games through a compatibility translation layer called Proton. That extra step, that extra work that has to be done behind the scenes underneath your game to make Windows games work on Linux. On paper, that should eat up a little performance. But it seems whatever performance it does chew on still leaves you ahead with better gaming than native Windows games on a native Windows install, which is just friggin' hilarious to me. And frankly, Microsoft should be deeply embarrassed by this. It's nuts. Spider-Man was the same kind of story. Usually I'd hoik up the power to make this game run nice and smooth, but the breathing room that SteamOS gives you with system resources and their management, nope. The game has never felt so good at 15 watts on the ROG Ally. Oh, and I should also mention at this point, for the sake of making my testing very consistent and easy to replicate as possible, I'm actually not recording these gameplay clips at settings I would necessarily use myself while playing. You know, for real. Because normally I'd spend time tweaking and fine-tuning and balancing everything out. But instead, again, for consistency and repeatability and just to make my life easier when I was doing these tests, I was, for all of these, except for one game, running each game's default medium settings. But with motion blur turned off usually because, well, I hate motion blur. And unless I mentioned it otherwise, we are running at 1080p native. Though there was a couple of games that wanted 720p for something playable at medium in 15-watt mode, and 2 games, including No Man's Sky, use an upscaler in their default settings, so I left that as is. And in its case, it is FSR 2.0 in its balanced mode. Hey, hello games, can we have FSR 3 or better at this point? Because it really is way better than 2.0, whatever. But yeah, No Man's Sky. It was always kind of a finicky bugger to get consistent performance out of on the ROG Ally, even in turbo mode. The nature of this game just always meant that frame rates were all over the damn place, and the blame lies most heavily at its CPU-heavy nature. But to my honest, enormous shock, it runs wildly better under SteamOS at perfectly matched settings and, of course, both at 15-watt default power profile. And I'm not overstating things when I tell you this is the difference for me, literally the difference between playable and unplayable. Under Windows, while decent frame rates were achievable, the inconsistency and the stuttering and the hitching made it far less pleasant to play than I would have liked, so I just kind of didn't. And despite this game being a treat to play curled up with a handheld, as those of you who have played the similarly shockingly good Nintendo Switch version have surely found out by now, the lurching performance inconsistency really did stop me from playing it on the Ally. But this is properly playable. Not just the big uplift in frame rates overall on average, but it's just a way smoother experience now. It's nuts. I had to triple check that I had the settings right. The difference was so large and so significant in feel. But I did indeed have each game running at identical settings. SteamOS is just that much better at managing your system resources. Then there's Spider-Man. This one I had to step down to 720p, and it uses an upscaler that Insomniac themselves developed specifically for their own games called IGTI, or Insomniac Games Temporal Injection. And aside from that, again, like all my other tests here, standard medium presets. And for this one, I actually left motion blur on because I don't find it as intrusive on this game as I do normally. And this is another one I had to double, then triple check that I had the settings matched properly, because this is a game that took a fair amount of fiddling to get it running nicely playably when I first got the ROG Ally. It was a very delicate balancing performance with the settings to get it just in that sweet spot. But here, right out of the gate, medium settings, it just goes. Oh, and fair warning, by the way, do not try to turn on ray tracing in this game out of curiosity to see how it might run. For whatever reason, it crashes and then bricks the game from launching again if you do that. It is an easy fix. You got to drop into SteamOS's desktop mode, it works faster than ever, by the way, and use the game's own pre-launcher panel, which is normally suppressed by SteamOS's big picture mode, but you need to go to desktop mode so you can get to that, so you can reset your graphics settings from there before the game launches, and after that you fixed it. I do try another game with ray tracing later, and it does work fine, so the ray tracing isn't the problem. And the ROG Ally's GPU does have 12 of AMD's second-gen ray tracing accelerator cores. I even have videos showing off just how well they work. But yeah, this game has a bug of some kind right now with that, so avoid it. Another game I considered borderline playable on the Ally before SteamOS arrived is Fallout 76. This is another game I needed to drop down to 720p for, as 1080p just wasn't pleasant at these medium settings. But on a Windows it ran, and it ran okay, but in the standard power profile, much like No Man's Sky, it just has massive issues with consistency. And it's a lot more kind of laggy feeling under Windows 2. The feel is just all over the damn place. It's kind of terrible. But under Steam, my God, it's like a new animal. It runs smooth and hitch-free. Now, the lag is entirely gone. The frame pacing issues are entirely gone. This is now very playable. And although I do not have any matched footage for this for a side-by-side with the Windows version, mainly because in the in-game events with all the servers players gathered in one spot in a dense and high-action set piece, that's just really unpleasant at these settings on the ROG Ally under Windows. It just doesn't work properly. Under SteamOS though, the alien invasion event currently running in the game, it's an event that's very heavy on enemy NPC numbers, tons of them around, spawning in all the time, lots of effects and explosions and corpse piles and loot and whatnot, and always with a large player of numbers, especially this early when the event runs. No problem at all here. Smooth as a Vault Dweller's skin. It dropped very briefly below 30 FPS, maybe 3 times throughout the entire event, but mostly, as you can see, mid-30s to low 40s were easily achievable for really nice feeling gameplay. How about Cyberpunk, a game I've been donkeying around with a lot recently because of all the Switch 2 related stuff we've been talking about in other videos. Yet another game I'd always move to 30 watt power mode to play, or at the very least that 18 watt custom mode with carefully tweaked settings. But I mean, look at this. And yeah, you guessed it, I double, triple, quadruple checked my settings on this one because I just couldn't believe it. I even ran the benchmark 3 times each, and it was consistent every time. It is insane how much better this runs on the Ally under SteamOS. Oh, and this is our first non-Steam native game that I'm testing, by the way. Although it is sold on the Steam store, and most people own it there, I suppose. My copy, though, is the GOG version. So to get this going, I had to drop to desktop mode, use an app called the Heroic Launcher, which is a free and open source game manager that can tie directly into your logins for Epic, for GOG, even for Amazon Prime game accounts, and pull your games down and install them for you at a click of a button, and even has an option with one click to just directly add them to SteamOS for you. So you can launch them easily in the default big picture mode without ever having to come back to desktop mode. So now we have Jedi Fallen Order, which you saw at the beginning of the video. Another one that was very borderline playable when I first tested it on the ROG Ally, and a game that also needs the EA launcher, despite being a Steam native install. And that EA launcher has historically been a headache under Linux. Just a headache in general because it's kind of terrible, but especially under Linux, and especially in Steam Big Picture mode, bit of a friggin' issue. But this time around, it installed and started without a single issue. And even the problem that I had a few months ago when I tested this exact same game under a SteamOS clone Linux install called Bazite, very popular alternative. When I tried that on a desktop PC, my saved games refused to cloud sync because they're managed by the EA launcher itself, not by Steam's cloud save sync system, and I just could not get my cloud sync save files to work at all, no matter what I did. Hey, under SteamOS though, those cloud saves did just work. I had to do nothing. They were just there. I'm not sure what the key difference is between how SteamOS handles the EA launcher and how Bazite did it, but I don't care. All I care about is it works, and that's what the average gamer is going to care about. Does it work? Yes. Do you have to fiddle? Do you have to look up something? Do you have to find some weird half-assed answer in a forum buried from 3 years ago? No, you don't have to do any of that. It just works. And the game itself, under SteamOS, it's another one that's a whole new life on the game. From barely playable without some rather severe graphical compromises to very playable in default medium settings. For this one though, I would definitely go in and fine-tune those settings to iron out some of the frame rate dips because we are still dancing on that borderline playable line. And while the frame rates are often closer in this one on the side-by-side than the others we've been looking at so far, the SteamOS gameplay is also obviously smoother with no hitching and that stuttering you can occasionally see in the Windows gameplay. And I am betting this hitching and stuttering is tied to the fact that SteamOS uses pre-cached shaders, while under Windows, it's doing it on the fly. Come to think of it, that's probably what was going on with No Man's Sky as well. But finally, that problem child I promised you. Star Wars Outlaws. A game that I am planning to try again sometime in the near future. I played it at launch, never finished it, but apparently now it's had a bunch of free updates and patches and changes that have fixed a lot of the annoyances that the game had at launch. But I chose this game to test with for a few reasons. Firstly, my copy was a media key, which means I did not get the Steam native version because Ubisoft supply the code for their own launcher. So mine's tied to the notoriously terrible Ubisoft launcher. So that makes it a good test for how SteamOS handles that crap. Secondly, it, like the EA launcher-hosted Star Wars game before it, also refused to sync my save files across the cloud when I tested this with Bazite. But here, on SteamOS, no problem. My save files made it across the cloud perfectly and without me doing a single damn thing. It just worked. The only bit of dancing I had to do was using Lutris, which a bit like the Heroic launcher is another sort of alternative storefront interface thing. Use that to install the Ubisoft launcher, and from there, yeah, again, you can just one-click add it to Steam and away you go. But thirdly, this is one of those games that uses ray tracing for its lighting engine by default. It is not an option you can turn on for fancier stuff, and you cannot turn it off in any way. You can turn it down, but never off. This always has ray tracing. It's just a core part of how the game's lighting engine works. And that makes it a bit of a bigger pig to run than similar looking games might expect to be. So, unlike all of the other tests, this time I'm not using medium settings. This one has to go on the low settings, the lowest possible settings, in 720p, with the most aggressive FSR3 upscaling factor possible. Also, as a side note, when you're looking at this, seems I forgot to correctly adjust the brightness setting on the SteamOS gameplay, so that's what's going on there. It's not a problem with how the game's rendering is working or anything like that, or a recording mistake. I just forgot to set the setting properly, so all the shadows are way darker than they should be and stuff like that. With this one, I also had a little trouble getting to work with the controller once I launched it through Steam. It initially refused controller input completely, but I went to Steam settings, I switched the Steam input to a keyboard and mouse profile, and then immediately back to a controller profile, and it worked perfectly from that point. Weird bug. But yeah, even though, once more of course, it's noticeably more performant over on SteamOS, with frequent trips below 30 FPS, it's still not what I would call playable. And that's where SteamOS's current inability to adjust that TDP power profile thing is a problem. Because this game really wants that 30-watt turbo mode to hit basically playable frame rates. This game's still a pig, and somewhat related, doing these tests again with even the latest patches and drivers makes me wonder how the hell this game is going to look and play on the Nintendo Switch 2 port they're promising to bring out by the end of the year. I wonder if they're replacing the ray tracing with baked-in lighting, or they're just going to really rely super heavily on DLSS and run it at a very low internal render or something. I don't know. Gonna be interesting though. But anyway, again, yeah, the turbo mode gets us to playable. And if we flip on VSync to lock it down a bit, we can clean up all that terrible screen tearing you're sitting there seeing in the recordings. You don't see the screen tearing if you're playing on the screen, of course, because you got VRR. But for the sake of recordings, I turned it on. And yeah, we can basically lock to 30 FPS when we do that. So this does sit as an example. And there are a few other games that are kind of borderline at this level of hardware. And that 30-watt mode versus the 15-watt default really is the difference between playable and unplayable for just a small fistful of games. So that still sits as an important functional update. We need ASAP for this to make this a truly sweeping game changer across the board. No competition at all. So then we have the question of battery life. I've not had time to do any proper testing on that, but I do know that when Tom's Guide, for example, recently tested Bazite on the ROG Ally X, they did see significantly better battery life versus Windows, and I'd expect SteamOS to offer up similarly improved efficiency on that score as well. So, end of day, am I going to be switching my ROG Ally over to SteamOS full time? Yeah, it's not even a hard choice. It's a really, really easy choice. The games run better. Why wouldn't I switch? Right now, my Windows install sits on a 2TB SSD, and I've been using the original SSD, which is a 512GB model, for SteamOS. So I'll be moving my SteamOS install to the 2TB model, of course, so I have much more room for games, but I'll also be partitioning it in half, or maybe a little less than half, and keeping Windows on it ready to dual boot, because I still need Windows sometimes. Mostly it's for testing game performance or hardware comparison videos and whatnot. It's just useful for me to have the default Windows installed there for various reasons. But also, even though I can use my Epic games, my GOG games, the EA launcher, the Ubisoft launcher, even the Amazon games if I wanted to do that, all of that stuff is there and it works if I need it. The one thing that SteamOS just can't do right now when it comes to non-Steam native games or launchers that I actually care about, that I use fairly regularly, is PC Game Pass. You still need Windows for that, which might change sometime soon. Microsoft seem pretty eager on their Xbox Everywhere shtick, so who knows, Game Pass for SteamOS or Linux in general might be on the cards at some point. There is even an ROG derivative device from Asus coming out that will literally be Xbox branded. And given the performance uplift we've been showing off today versus Windows, you have to know the question of SteamOS on that device will come up. It has to. So there might be a stronger demand than ever for PC Game Pass to appear on SteamOS and Linux in general. But yeah, I'm not quite free from Windows as a PC gamer yet. But my God, we are so damn close now. We are as close as we've ever been from breaking those MS chains, at least on our handhelds. Once this evolves to broader support for desktop rigs with CPU and GPU configuration support that isn't limited to AMG's handheld APUs only, well, yeah, that's down the road a bit yet. You know, we're probably a couple of years away from thinking about that, probably. But, you know, the dream is alive, and it's alive and well. So thanks for watching. I am Blunty. Thank you as always to the patrons, and I will catch you next time. I am excited by this.
10:30, active robbery in progress. Report came in near Gracie Mansion. Over.